All right, sound check, because we didn't have sound for a minute yesterday morning, and I don't want that to happen again. All right. And good morning. Okay, so it's me again, baby. I hope y'all have a good cup of coffee in front of you, ready to get started. I'm just gonna hop right into it today, and I think what I'm gonna do this morning is I'm gonna do a quick treatment of this set of articles on the topic. I'll be talking about the Title 42 situation, because it is in fact Taco Tuesday. It is the last Taco Tuesday before Christmas, and given the leftovers after Christmas dinner, might be the last Taco Tuesday of 2022. So I'm going to give this a quick treatment, and then I might spend a little time talking about Christmas shopping. So U.S. Appeals Court allows Title 42 immigration rules to expire as President Biden remains quiet on migration fix. There is in fact a reason that Joe, there's a couple of plausible reasons, nay probable, that Joe isn't speaking much on migration. One, the handlers have realized, I think it's becoming clearer and clearer as we see less and less of Joe publicly. The handlers have realized that he just cannot be trusted to stay on script. If you let Joe Biden get up there and start talking about the migration crisis, he's going to start talking about sniffing brown children, and it's not going to go well for him. And I mean, to what should be everyone's great shock, it sounds more and more like they're gonna run him. It sounds more and more like Joe is gonna run for re-election in 2024. Now, I want you to think back to the debate between Trump and Biden, where Donald Trump actually spoke about coyotes and their involvement and the danger of coyotes with their involvement in the illegal immigration crisis. And almost immediately, I think it started happening before the debate was over, Twitter was alight with leftists posting video clips and memes, mostly centered around Wile E. Coyote, mocking Donald Trump for apparently believing that illegal immigrants ride these feral dog breeds across the border into the country like orcs on wargs. And the rest of us who have ever seen a Cheech and Chong movie, or, I don't know, spoken the English language for more than half our lives, immediately understood, no, this is not some obscure term of art or sidelong legal description that the general public isn't aware of, that colloquially doesn't exist in the American lexicon. We know what a coyote is, right? Just like if you start talking about guerrilla warriors, if Donald Trump were to mention guerrilla warriors conducting insurgent activities in South America, nobody would think that he was talking about gorillas. We would all understand that the spelling of the word was G-U-E, guerrillas. The word literally means warrior, and in contextual colloquial use, always refers to paramilitary, non-governmentally associated, freedom fighter type guerrillas. Same thing with the word coyote, right? You all know what a coyote is. But suddenly, just all of a sudden, in the middle of this debate, before the debate was even over, you've got the entire Biden-supporting left wing tweeting and making fun of Donald Trump for using the word coyote like they don't know what it is. A coyote, right, in this particular usage, obviously refers to someone who is a human trafficker. He's in the business of taking money in exchange for the provision of the service of smuggling human beings illegally across a border. Now, in fairness, we generally don't think of coyotes smuggling people across borders other than the U.S.-Mexico border. And that's largely because most other countries don't have the immigration problem the U.S. has. Very few other countries have an immigration problem. In fact, no other countries have an immigration problem that is even comparable to that of the U.S. Now, Great Britain has a substantial immigration problem, and it's a very different kind of immigration problem, largely because they've allowed certain segments to establish these very exclusive quadrants. They've got these Muslim districts where the regular British police, will not go. Crackshot says human trafficker, rapist, and murderers, coyotes. Yes, it is not inconsequential to the conversation that some 80% of criminal alien women are raped on their journey to illegally infiltrate the United States of America. So for all of those out there, and I talked about this a little bit yesterday, people saying a person cannot be illegal. You're right. Actions are prohibited by law, not humans, not people, specific activities. A person who conducts actions which are prohibited by law is a criminal. And criminals, legitimate criminals, should be treated of a piece. Incarcerated, expelled, executed, depending on the severity of the crime. For example, a government official engaged in the suppression of civil liberties under color of law should be prosecuted and then punished as prescribed by law, with up to and including the death penalty, depending on the severity of that deprivation of civil liberties. But when you talk about civil liberties, freedom of movement is one thing. An invasion is a very different creature. Now, salient to this conversation, freedom of movement is in fact a piece of the conversation, because what Title 42 is, and certainly will soon to have been was, what Title 42 is, CNN tries to cover it. They try. What is Title 42, how it changed things at the border, and why it's sparking debate? This is from CNN a couple days ago. The Biden administration plans to lift Title 42 have been raising concerns in border communities and sparking fierce debate in Washington. Of course they've been raising concerns in border communities. Border communities right now are being overrun with criminal aliens. hostile foreign invaders are rushing over the border at not just alarming, but historically unforeseen levels. Extraordinary levels. And I'll refer you back to Milton Friedman, who pointed out very correctly and very clearly that a country, whether it's a good idea or not, it is in fact arguable that a country can have an unlimited welfare state. A country as wealthy as the United States can support an unlimited welfare state. And it can also be true that open borders with totally free movement can be good for trade and the economy. But you cannot have both. It is possible to have one or the other, and there are good arguments to be made for either case, but not for a combination of the two. And keep in mind, I am in no way arguing for an unlimited welfare state. I'm making a very different claim. That we have a functionally unlimited welfare state is true. That there is a border crisis which is not only exacerbated by the incentive provided by the welfare state, and Joe Biden explicitly, let's not forget, as soon as the election was over, Biden said, hey, come on in. He went and made explicit speeches where he went out of his way to encourage hostile foreign nationals to enter our borders, and went so far as to suggest that by his being president, that the law no longer prescribed the exclusion of foreign entities from U.S. hostile soil. Never forget that. So, as the Title 42, in the early days of the coronavirus pandemic, the CDC issued a public health order on March 20, 2020, that officials said aimed to stop the spread of COVID-19. The order allowed authorities to swiftly expel migrants at U.S. land borders, and it's been extended multiple times. Now, the order to stop immigration generally, not just illegal immigration, but given what we knew at the beginning of the pandemic, which included the fact that China had gone out of its way to stop all of the internecine travel within its own borders, right? China actually shut down travel between provinces in China, most especially from Wuhan out, but did not, and this should alarm you, did not halt the expatriation of Chinese citizens, most notably from Wuhan. If you'll remember, those of you who've been watching for a long time, back at the beginning of 2020, when it was verboten to speak about the theory of the Wuhan lab leak. Okay, I've got an IGU, China, K. Kona. Yeah. Yes, we do hope that Donald Trump wins the presidency again, but I'm less concerned that Donald Trump wins in 2024 than that the Democrats do not. I like the Donald. I may have he may have exceeded his sell-by date. And that's about all the commentary I have time for that strays from the topic there, sweetheart. But please do enjoy the rest of the show. So, if you'll remember, back at the beginning of 2020, like I was saying, it was verboten to speak about the idea of a Wuhan lab leak. Now, of course, we have the evidence that's absolutely what happened. That has gone, like most of the tinfoil hat nut job conspiracy theories, it's just turned out to be predictive. But back then, I said it doesn't matter so much, for the purposes of planning and tactics and strategy, it doesn't matter so much whether or not it was in fact a leak. The fact of the matter is that the majority of the virus at the time was in the control of the Chinese government, which is to say that its individual citizens were the primary hosts and carriers and primary vectors of transmission. And so the strategic understanding of that situation needed to be that whether it's deliberately weaponized or only accidentally weaponized, it was very clear with the internecine prohibition on travel between provinces, coupled with the absolute non-action on expatriation from China, it was very, very clear that China had chosen to weaponize the virus and its transmission. And so whether or not they had gotten their hands on that particular weapon intentionally was irrelevant to the strategic facts on the ground. Right. So the implementation of something like Title 42 to prevent hostile foreign invaders from crossing the border and coming into this country to try and spread that disease was an obvious no-brainer. Shutting down the borders, obviously. Why let the unwashed masses enter without precaution? Right? Now, I want you to remember that the whole time there was this psychotic argument about opening borders and about how it was racist to shut down travel and this, that, and the other thing, being made by the same people who argued for and in fact implemented the total closure and shutdown of businesses across the country, murdered thousands of small independent businesses. So as we look at Title 42, here's the news. Come on, mouse. Operate with me. So, U.S. Appeals Court allows Title 42 immigration rules to expire as President Biden remains quiet on migration fix. Of course, he remains quiet. We've already covered that. Restrictions on asylum requests that have prevented hundreds of thousands of migrants from entering the U.S. in recent years are set to expire next week following an appeals court ruling. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled Friday not to keep the Trump-era policy that restricts the number of asylum seekers the U.S. would allow under COVID-19 pandemic, collectively known as Title 42. Now, in all fairness, there is a good argument to be made that the conditions under which this Title 42 rule was enacted have gone by the wayside. They have. It would not be fair. It would not be fair for me to treat Title 42 differently just because I like the general outcome of it preventing migration. The correct answer here is to let Title 42 lapse, declare loudly and clearly that the pandemic is over, and yes, sweetheart, it's okay to stop wearing your mask while you're alone driving in your car. And for God's sake, take it off before you try and take my order at the drive-thru. Your English is already inadequate. But why should I expect people who grew up speaking only one language to speak it adequately? Parks, you know what I mean. You know what I'm talking about. These sons of bitches, they get on that microphone to take my order at the drive-thru, and all I can think is, how can you not speak the one language you grew up with? Ilonggo sin naputa. Y no puedes hablar en todas otras. Pero you only ever learn one language, and you cannot speak it. Hey, sipsekia. I pull up to a drive-thru, and I just want to start at the top and work my way through, just like, good morning, привет, 안녕하십니까, Ohio, Hola. Ah, hola. Ok. Tienes hola. Podemos hacer eso en español. Está bien. So, yo quiero una hamburguesa. Jesus Christ. So, if I could just get a native English speaker who speaks native English, it would simplify everything. Ni hao indeed, my striker man. But it would be unfair to say that given the expiration of the pandemic situation, that Title 42 should remain in place. The correct answer, of course, is to let Title 42 raise and go away immediately after passing legitimate legislation to close the border entirely until such a time as this government, whose responsibility by constitutional authority is to protect the sovereignty and security of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, until such a time as that entity can reasonably guarantee me that the vast majority of hostile foreign invaders have been identified and either deported or executed. And I do say deported or executed. Notice I did not mention incarceration there because it is already a grotesque tax burden on the U.S. taxpayer that these people are allowed to exist within these borders and consume our very expensive resources. So, Title 42 was set to expire next week. And here's the shocker. Here's the bombshell. Here's the thing that blows my mind. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts. Boy, that's a hell of a title. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts temporarily got something right for once. That's right. John Roberts of Obamacare and Obergefell fame. John Roberts, the rubber stamp for the Democrat Party for the last 20 years, has accidentally stumbled into getting something right. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts temporarily halted Wednesday's planned lifting of the Trump-era Title 42 health program Monday after more than a dozen Republican-led states filed an emergency application to the High Court. Of course, Republican-led states filed the emergency injunction. They're the southern border states, right? Primarily Texas, obviously. Because as soon as Title 42 is lifted, without something to fill in that space, the border gets overrun. And something that you have to hear, something that you have to understand about this. You remember the migrant caravans, people coming across the border. They're not just Mexicans fleeing cartel violence. In fact, when we were talking about the migrant caravans, the majority of those were not Mexicans. They talked about seeking asylum. These are not legitimate asylum seekers. If they were seeking asylum, legitimately seeking asylum from political prosecution or the like from their host nation, most of which were in South America, then the first nation, the first next nation, is the one to whom they need to apply for asylum. Right? If you're about to get your, feet cut off because you're a member of the Falun Gong in China and you've been chased down for organ harvesting and you need to escape China and apply for asylum in another country, you don't go all the way to the opposite side of the planet. Right? You're a pretty young lady. who found yourself in the wrong dark alley and somebody came up with a gun and demanded that you assume a position and you run. Do you run past a dozen police departments before you pick one that serves the lattes you like? Hell no. Hell no. You run up and bang on the window of the very first cop car you see. Or if you're really smart, sweetheart, you run into the first biker bar you see. See how that works out for the assailant, as it were. So, I say all that to say this, and I'm going to go ahead and put a pen in it and wrap it up because I need to get going. Title 42 was a nearly adequately correct measure taken in haste within the context of a confusing and dangerous situation. Now, I am willing. I want to make this clear because we talked about the amnesty article, the COVID amnesty article, where we have to forgive each other for mistakes that were made during COVID, and we went through it and talked about it in great detail. The mistakes that were made entirely by one party. They were devastating and have created a world in which prosperity and liberty have been truncated to an absolutely terrifying degree. There will be no amnesty. There is no forgiveness for what you people did, because we told you at the time that what you were doing was wrong. We were right about literally everything. And just like every other thing that the left has ever done, whether it's... I don't have time to go down the list. The list is long, and you know the list. Obamacare, DOMA. They even when they seem to be getting something right, they do it wrong. But go all the way back to the first 3-4 months of 2020. There is some room for grace there. Because there was a big scary thing, and we didn't have the information. Now, we had a lot more information than they wanted you to believe. Like I mentioned a minute ago, we had the Wuhan lab leak thing figured out as early as February of 2020. And as late as June or July of 2020, it was still being reported as the now debunked Wuhan lab theory. Whoa. You said debunked. Where? How was it debunked? Oh, you can't point to that. You know, whenever you hear the lefties say the now debunked blah, 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 the first question you ask is, whoa. Who debunked it? Where was it debunked? Show me the information. You cannot take their word for that ever. But those first 3 or 4 months, there were some things we didn't know. But I want you to remember this also. Just like the lab theory, just like the mask thing, we had information. And the people who got it wrong at every single step of the way had active government agents at Twitter, Google, Facebook, etc., actively suppressing the information that would have allowed us to handle things more correctly and more quickly. There's every reason to believe that without the political and social intervention of Nancy Pelosi and I don't remember if it was Cuomo or de Blasio, but it was probably both of them. But without the active intervention of these leftists going into Chinatown and saying, "Oh, you're racists talking about the Chinese virus. You need to come to Chinatown in large crowds and come to the theater and come." If it hadn't been for those idiots and assholes, the 14 days to slow the spread probably wouldn't have even happened. It certainly wouldn't have been as necessary as it was argued to be, which, by the way, is not a claim that it was ever necessary to begin with. It seemed like a reasonable thing to do at the time, but then it got unreasonable real fast. So Title 42 was an imperfect answer in the midst of an imperfect situation. The correct answer now is to let it die, but not before it is replaced. And that, y'all gotta appreciate, that is not something you will hear from me often. Like when we were hoping and praying that a Trump presidency with a conservative majority in the House and Senate was going to repeal Obamacare, they kept saying, "Oh, repeal and replace, repeal and replace." No. Replace with what? One does not harvest a new cancer to replace the one that is about to be excised. You remove it. You take it away. So, that's all I've got for you this morning, guys. I love you, and I will see you tomorrow.